Welcome to David's Stories. Today we follow Harley Fields, a retired businessman ignored by his daughter for years who faces her sudden demand for money, reclaims his dignity and redirects his legacy to charity. Finding peace. Subscribe and hit the bell for weekly tales of truth and triumph. Share your thoughts below. Let's start the story. The air in my Philadelphia row house carried the faint scent of old wood and coffee, a comforting ritual that anchored me to the present. At 67, I'd learned to find solace in the mundane, the hum of my laptop, the soft creak of my armchair, the way sunlight filtered through the blinds casting slanted shadows across my modest living room. But today those shadows felt heavier, as if they carried whispers of a past I'd tried to bury. My name is Harley Fields, and for 5 years I've lived in a silence louder than any storm, a silence imposed by my daughter Cora. I sat at my desk, the glow of investment portfolios flickering on my screen. Numbers danced in orderly rows, modest gains, steady returns, nothing to stir the blood. Outside, the August heat pressed against the windows, thick and unyielding as if the city itself were holding its breath. I'd just finished my coffee, the bitter dregs cold in the mug when a memory stirred unbidden. A memory of Cora's laughter, bright and untainted from a time when she was still my little girl. That was long before she'd chosen to erase me from her life, before the chasm between us grew too wide to bridge. 5 years. 5 years of unanswered birthday cards, texts, swallowed by the void. Holiday messages met with nothing but the echo of my own hope. I'd built a construction company from sweat and grit over 43 years, turning dreams into steel and concrete. When I sold it for a sum that exceeded $2 million, I thought I'd secured a legacy not just for myself, but for Cora and her husband Stuart. I gave them $300,000, no strings attached, to buy a house to start their life together. It was a gift born of love, a father's desire to see his daughter thrive. But it wasn't enough, not for them. The memory of that day still cuts like a blade. Stuart stood in my living room, arms crossed, his eyes glinting with a cold, calculating edge. "$2 million, Harley? And you toss us scraps." His voice dripped with contempt, each word a chisel chipping away at the bond I'd thought unbreakable. Cora stood beside him, silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. I'd expected her to speak, to defend the father who'd raised her, who'd poured his life into giving her a foundation. Instead, she said, "Maybe if you'd been fair, we wouldn't have to do this, as if I were the one who'd betrayed them." I tried to explain. The sale wasn't a windfall. It came with debts, obligations, retirement funds for employees who'd worked beside me for decades. The $2 million wasn't a pile of cash to be divided like a pie. But Stuart talked over me, his voice rising, accusing me of hiding money, of cheating them, of valuing my workers more than my own blood. Cora's silence was louder than his shouts. It was the silence of agreement, of complicity. I asked them to leave. They did. And then nothing. For 5 years I sent cards, texts, messages into the void. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Thinking of you. Merry Christmas. Would love to hear from you." Each one a small act of faith, a thread I refused to cut. Each one returned with silence, a reminder that my daughter had chosen money over me. I kept them all, those unopened cards, in a locked drawer in my study, a shrine to a relationship that no longer existed. Sometimes late at night I'd open that drawer, trace the edges of the envelopes, and wonder where I'd gone wrong. The sun climbed higher outside, and I pushed the memory aside, forcing myself to focus on the present. My garden needed watering. The tomato plants I'd nurtured since spring were heavy with fruit, their leaves curling slightly in the heat. Normal things, mundane things, things that made sense in a world that often didn't. I stood stretching my legs and moved to the kitchen to refill my coffee. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. It was a life I'd built carefully, brick by brick, after the sale of my company. A life of discipline, of solitude, of small victories like a well-tended garden or a balanced portfolio. But something felt off today. A prickle at the back of my neck like the air before a storm. I couldn't place it, but it was there, a whisper of unease that made me pause at the kitchen window, staring at the backyard I'd shaped with my own hands. The grass needed mowing. I made a mental note to call Danny Morrison, my neighbor, a retired cop who sometimes helped with yard work. He'd been a steady presence these past years, his gruff kindness a rare anchor in my isolated world. I returned to my desk, the laptop screen still glowing with numbers. I was about to close it when my phone buzzed, the sound sharp and jarring in the quiet. An unknown number flashed on the screen. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the decline button. Spam calls were a daily nuisance. Voices peddling scams or warranties for cars I didn't own. But something stopped me. A gut instinct, the kind I'd honed over decades of reading people, of knowing when a deal was too good to be true. I answered. "Hello, this is Harley." The voice on the other end was a blade of ice cutting through the years. "I'm having dinner tomorrow evening at 6. You should come." "Cora." My chest tightened, my breath catching, as if the air had turned solid. 5 years of silence, and now her voice, formal, flat, carrying no warmth, no hint of the daughter I'd once known. I gripped the phone, my knuckles whitening. "Cora," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "It's good to hear from you. I didn't expect tomorrow at 6. She cut in, her words sharp, slicing through my attempt at connection. "My address hasn't changed. Bring $200,000 with you." The number hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. $200,000. Demanded as casually as one might ask for a bottle of wine. I sat up straighter, the portfolio spreadsheet forgotten. "What, Cora? I don't understand. Why now?" "Why? It's not complicated," she said, her tone suggesting I was being deliberately obtuse. "Tomorrow, 6. Don't be late." The line went dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence that followed. My hand trembled not from age, but from the sheer audacity of what had just happened. $200,000. After 5 years of nothing, no calls, no visits, no acknowledgement that I existed. I lowered the phone slowly, placing it on the desk as if it might shatter. My coffee sat cold, untouched. I stood, legs unsteady, and walked to the kitchen, pouring a fresh cup I didn't drink, needing the ritual to ground me. Outside the backyard was unchanged grass, tomatoes, the small patch of order I'd carved from chaos. But nothing felt normal now. I moved to the living room, my eyes drawn to the bookshelf, where the photo album lived, its spine worn from years of quiet handling. I opened it, the pages creaking softly, revealing Cora at 5, gap-toothed and laughing, perched on my shoulders at the park. Cora at 18, cap and gown, her smile wide and genuine. Cora at 29 in her wedding dress, looking at Stuart with such hope. When had that hope turned to calculation? When had my daughter become a stranger? I closed the album, my hands steady now, and returned to my desk. The phone lay there, a silent accusation. Why now? Why 200,000? The questions churned, each one a thread in a tapestry I couldn't yet see. I opened my laptop, the screen still displaying my investments, but my mind was elsewhere. I clicked to Facebook, a platform I rarely use, driven by a nagging suspicion. My profile loaded, and there it was, the post from yesterday. A moment of simple pride. My new Mercedes, some class silver and gleaming in my driveway. The caption, treating myself after some successful investments. Life is good. I scrolled to the view count, the list of names who'd seen it. And there among them was Cora Fields. My breath stopped. The timestamp showed she'd viewed it 3 times yesterday. At 6:00 p.m., 7:15 p.m., 9:43 p.m. 3 visits to stare at my car, my words, my small claim to joy. And this morning she'd called. I took a screenshot, my fingers moving on instinct, preserving the evidence. The timing wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. 5 years of silence, and within 24 hours of that post she'd reached out not with love, not with regret, but with a demand for money. The Mercedes had cost me $150,000, a splurge I'd earned through decades of careful investing, of living modestly while building wealth brick by brick. It was a reward, a symbol of discipline. Cora had seen it and calculated. Calculated that if I could afford that car, I had liquid assets. Calculated that I was weak enough, lonely enough, desperate enough for her return to comply with any demand. The realization was a cold blade, sharper than her voice had been. This wasn't a daughter reaching out to her father. This was a predator circling, sensing opportunity in my moment of pride. I closed Facebook, my jaw tight, and stared at the screenshot. 24 hours. That's all it took for her to break her silence, to see me not as her father, but as a vault to be cracked. I stood pacing the living room, my mind racing. The prickle of unease from earlier had grown into something else, a sense of something hidden, a puzzle I hadn't yet solved. Cora's call wasn't just about money. It felt like the opening move in a game I didn't yet understand. I stopped at the window, staring at the backyard again, the tomatoes glowing red in the sunlight. A shadow moved in the corner of my vision, brief and fleeting, like a figure passing beyond the fence. I blinked, and it was gone. A trick of the light, perhaps, but it left me unsettled, as if the world itself was watching, waiting for my next move. I returned to my desk, pulling open the drawer where I kept the unopened cards. They were still there, a stack of quiet rejections, each one a wound I'd carried for years. I didn't open them this time. Instead, I reached for a business card tucked among old contracts, Margaret Chen, attorney at law. Margaret had handled the sale of my company, her sharp mind cutting through legal complexities like a knife through silk. If anyone could help me navigate this, it was her. I dialed her office. My voice steady despite the storm inside. "Chen Law Associates." The receptionist answered, her tone crisp and professional. "This is Harley Fields. I need to speak with Margaret Chen today if possible. It's urgent estate planning and family matters." A pause. The sound of keyboard clicks. "Ms. Chen's schedule is full today, Mr. Fields. Could we arrange something for next week? Please tell her it concerns restructuring my will and establishing a trust. I can work around her schedule." Another pause, then hold music. I stared at the photo album still open on the coffee table. Cora's wedding photo gazed back at me, her smile a stranger's now. When had I stopped seeing my daughter in that face? When had she become someone who could demand $200,000 as if it were her due? "Mr. Fields," the receptionist returned. "Ms. Chen can see you at 4 this afternoon. Will that work? I'll be there." "Thank you." I set the phone down, my hands steady now, no tremor. The unease lingered, but it was joined by something else. A spark of resolve, a flicker of the man who'd built an empire from nothing. Cora thought she could snap her fingers and I'd come running with my checkbook. She'd learn otherwise. I glanced at the screenshot again, the timestamp of her views like a map to her motives. This wasn't just about money. There was something more, something hidden in her sudden reappearance. And I'd find it. I spent the next hours preparing, gathering documents, financial statements, the original will records of the $300,000 gift I'd given Cora and Stuart. Margaret would need the full picture, every brick in the foundation of my decision. But more than that, I needed to prepare myself. This wasn't about revenge, not in the petty sense. It was about reclaiming something, my dignity, my autonomy, the right to decide who deserved my legacy. As I sorted papers, that shadow flickered again outside just beyond the garden fence. I froze, my heart quickening. It was gone as quickly as it had appeared, but this time I was sure I'd seen it, a silhouette too brief to define. I stepped to the window, scanning the yard. Nothing. Just grass and tomatoes and the weight of a humid afternoon. But the prickle on my neck remained, a warning I couldn't shake. I locked the drawer, securing the cards, the documents, the past. The clock showed noon. 4 hours until my meeting with Margaret. 4 hours to transform the shocked father who'd answered that call into a man who could face whatever game Cora was playing. I'd built structures that stood for decades. I could build boundaries just as strong. The drive to Margaret's office was a blur. Philadelphia's streets unfolding in a haze of heat and memory. I carried a leather folder thick with evidence, my resolve hardening with every mile. Margaret's building was modern, all glass and steel, a contrast to the worn brick of my row house. The elevator hummed, carrying me to the 4th floor, where the receptionist greeted me with a nod of recognition. "Mr. Viesgun. Fields, Ms. Chen is expecting you." Margaret emerged from her office, mid-50s, sharp-eyed, her handshake firm and brief. "Harley, come in." Her conference room overlooked the city afternoon light slicing through vertical blinds. I sat across from her, opening my folder, laying out the evidence like a blueprint. The Facebook screenshot, Cora's viewing history, the timeline of 5 years of silence. "She hasn't spoken to me in 5 years?" I said, my voice level. "Not a word. Yesterday I posted about my car, and this morning she called demanding $200,000. Margaret's pen moved steadily across her legal pad, her face unreadable but attentive. "Tell me about the estrangement." I recounted it all: the company sale, the $300,000 gift, Stewart's accusations. Cora's silence. "I tried," I said, tapping the timeline. "Cards, messages, every attempt documented here, every rejection." She studied the papers, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she saw something I hadn't. "What do you want to do, Harley?" "I want a new will," I said, the words coming easier than I'd expected. "I want to disinherit Cora completely. Everything, approximately $1.8 million in assets, goes to the Construction Industry Veterans Support Fund." Margaret set down her pen, her gaze steady. "Are you certain disinheriting your only child is permanent? Once you present this, there's no walking it back." "I've had 5 years to think about what family means," I said. "She made her choice. Now I'm making mine." She nodded, pulling a legal reference from her shelf. "Pennsylvania law gives you testamentary freedom, but challenges are possible. We'll make it bulletproof." As we worked through the details, that prickle returned sharper now. I glanced at the window, half expecting to see that shadow again, but there was only the city skyline shimmering in the heat. Something was coming, a move I hadn't anticipated, a piece of the puzzle still hidden. But I was ready. I'd built my life on solid foundations, and I'd build this decision the same way. The silence in my Philadelphia row house was deafening, the kind that presses against your ears and makes every small sound a creak in the floorboards. The hum of the refrigerator feel like an intrusion. I stood frozen at my kitchen window, the cold coffee mug in my hands anchoring me to the moment. Cora's voice still echoed in my mind, sharp and unyielding, slicing through 5 years of absence with a single phone call. "Tomorrow at 6. Bring $200,000 with you." The words hung in the air like a curse, their audacity burning hotter than the August sun outside. I set the mug down, its ceramic clink against the counter startlingly loud. My hand, steady moments ago, trembled slightly, not from age, but from the weight of betrayal. 5 years. 5 years of silence, of unopened birthday cards and unanswered texts. And now this, a demand for money, as if I were a stranger, a bank vault to be pried open. I moved back to my desk, the laptop screen still glowing with the Facebook post that had sparked this. My new Mercedes S-Class Silver, and gleaming a $150,000 reward for decades of discipline. The caption, "Treating myself after some successful investments." "Life is good." Cora's name among the viewers, time-stamped 3 times yesterday evening. 6:00 p.m., 7:15 p.m., 9:43 p.m. Felt like a map to her intentions. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking under my weight, and stared at the screenshot I'd taken. The timestamps weren't just numbers. They were a timeline of calculation, a cold arithmetic that reduced our relationship to dollars and cents. She'd seen the car, the caption, and within 24 hours she'd called. Not to reconnect, not to apologize, but to demand $200,000. The realization settled in my gut like a stone, heavy and cold. This wasn't a daughter reaching out to her father. This was a predator sensing weakness, circling for the kill. I closed my eyes, trying to summon the Cora I'd known, the girl who'd laughed on my shoulders at the park, who'd clutched her diploma with pride, who'd looked at Stuart with such hope on her wedding day. But that Cora was gone, replaced by this stranger whose voice carried no warmth, only expectation. I opened my eyes, the room unchanged, the shadows of the blinds stretching longer across the floor. That prickle from earlier, the one I'd felt at the window, returned, a whisper of unease, like a thread I couldn't quite grasp. Something was off. Something beyond the call, beyond the money. I couldn't name it, but it was there, lurking in the corners of my mind. I stood pacing the living room, my steps measured, but restless. The photo album on the bookshelf caught my eye, its worn spine a silent accusation. I didn't touch it. Instead, I returned to my phone, opening the message thread with Cora's name. 5 years of one-sided conversation stared back at me. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Hope you're doing well. Merry Christmas. Would love to hear from you. Thinking of you today. Miss you. Each message a monument to rejection, a testament to her choice to cut me out. I scrolled to the bottom, the cursor blinking in the empty text field, but I didn't type. What was there to say? She'd made her move, and now it was my turn. The backyard drew me again, the tomatoes glowing red in the midday sun. I stepped outside, the heat wrapping around me like a shroud. The grass was uneven blades curling in the dry air. I scanned the fence line, half expecting to see that shadow again, the fleeting silhouette I'd glimpsed earlier. Nothing. Just the quiet hum of the neighborhood children laughing somewhere down the street, a car engine fading in the distance. But the prickle remained sharper now, as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I went back inside, locking the door behind me, and sat at my desk. The screenshot of Cora's Facebook views was still open, the timestamps glaring like evidence in a trial. I enlarged the image, studying the details, searching for something I might have missed. The car, silver and sleek, was parked in my driveway, its curves catching the light. The caption was simple, proud, but not boastful. I scrolled through the other names who'd viewed it. Neighbors, old colleagues, a few distant cousins. None stood out, only Cora's name carried weight. Her 3 visits, a deliberate act, a calculation that had led to that call. Why $200,000? The number was precise, not a round figure like $100,000 or $500,000. It suggested a specific need, a debt, a plan. I leaned back, my mind turning over possibilities. Was she in trouble? Was Stuart behind this, his voice from 5 years ago echoing in my memory? You sold the company for over $2 million and gave us scraps. He'd always been the instigator, his ambition a sharp edge that cut through Cora's softer nature. Had he pushed her into this, or had she become someone else entirely? I opened a new browser tab, typing Pennsylvania state law into the search bar. Not because I was ready to act, but because knowledge was power, and I'd learned long ago that preparation was the foundation of strength. Pages loaded, articles on inheritance rights trusts, disinheritance laws. I skimmed them, my construction background kicking in, analyzing the legal landscape like a blueprint. You didn't build a skyscraper without understanding the soil beneath it. You didn't face a demand like Cora's without knowing your options. The clock on the wall ticked toward 2 o'clock. 2 hours until my meeting with Margaret Chen. I gathered the documents I'd prepared, financial statements, the original will records of the $300,000 gift to Cora and Stuart. But as I stacked them in my leather folder, that prickle returned stronger now, like a warning whispered in a language I didn't speak. I glanced out the window again, the backyard still and empty. No shadow, no movement. Yet the feeling lingered, as if something or someone was watching, waiting for me to make my move. I stood, needing to move, to shake off the unease. The house felt smaller now, the walls pressing in, the silence heavier than before. I walked to the front door, stepping onto the porch, the heat hitting me like a wave. The street was quiet, the row houses across the way basking in the afternoon sun. Danny Morrison's house 2 doors down had its curtains drawn, but I knew he was home, probably tinkering in his garage. I considered walking over, asking if he'd seen anything unusual, but stopped myself. What would I say? That I felt watched? That my daughter's call had stirred something I couldn't explain? Instead, I returned inside, locking the door again. The folder lay on the desk, a tangible step toward reclaiming control. But control felt elusive, like trying to grip smoke. Cora's call wasn't just about money, it was a move in a game I hadn't agreed to play. I sat down, opening my laptop again, and pulled up the Facebook post one last time. I clicked through the settings, checking the privacy options, wondering if I'd missed something, a comment, a reaction, a clue. There was nothing, just Cora's name, her 3 visits, and the weight of her silence, breaking. I closed the laptop, my decision solidifying. Whatever Cora was planning, I wouldn't be her pawn. I'd built a company from nothing, navigated contracts and crises, and walked away with my head high. I could navigate this too. But the shadow, the prickle, the sense of something unseen, they gnawed at me. I stood, grabbing my keys and the folder, and headed for the car. The Mercedes gleamed in the driveway, its silver curves a silent testament to my discipline. It was also the spark that had ignited this, and I needed to know why. The drive to Margaret's office was a chance to think, to let the pieces settle. Philadelphia's streets unfolded around me, the city's pulse steady, despite my own racing thoughts. I replayed Cora's voice, her words, the flatness that carried no trace of the daughter I'd raised. I thought of Stuart, his smug certainty 5 years ago, his accusation that I'd cheated them. Was this his plan, or had Cora become the architect of her own ambition? The $200,000 demand felt like a piece of a larger puzzle, one I'd need to solve before I faced her tomorrow. I parked in the garage beneath Margaret's building, the concrete walls cool and shadowed. The folder was heavy in my hand, a shield of evidence and intent. As I rode the elevator to the 4th floor, that prickle returned sharper now, like a whisper in the dark. I stepped out, the receptionist's smile, professional but distant. "Mr. Fields, Ms. Chen is expecting you." I nodded, my resolve firm, but my mind still turning over that unseen thread, that shadow that didn't belong. Whatever Cora was playing at, I'd be ready. I'd built my life on solid ground, and no one, not even my daughter, would shake that foundation. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the sleek, modern reception area of Chen Law Associates. The air was cool, scented with the faint musk of polished wood, and filtered air, a stark contrast to the humid weight of Philadelphia outside. I clutched my leather folder. Its contents, financial statements. The original will records of the $300,000 gift to Cora and Stuart, feeling like armor against the storm brewing in my chest. My name is Harley Fields, and at 67, I'd built a life on solid foundations. Now I was here to lay a new one that would protect what I'd created from a daughter who saw me only as a resource to exploit. Margaret Chen emerged from her office, her sharp eyes meeting mine with a flicker of recognition. Mid-50s, her presence was a quiet force, her handshake firm and brief. "Harley, come in," she said, gesturing toward the conference room. Her gaze lingered a moment longer than necessary, as if she sensed the weight I carried. I followed the prickle of unease from earlier, still clinging to me, sharper now, like a whisper in a language I couldn't quite decipher. The conference room overlooked the city afternoon light, slicing through vertical blinds, casting jagged shadows across the polished table. I sat, opening my folder with deliberate care, laying out the evidence like a blueprint for a structure yet to be built. The Facebook screenshot Cora's 3 visits to my post about the Mercedes: 6:00 p.m., 7:15 p.m., 9:43 p.m. sat at the top, a silent accusation. Next to it, a timeline I'd written, documenting 5 years of ignored birthday cards, unanswered texts, and the cold void of Cora's absence. She hasn't spoken to me in 5 years. I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. Not a word. Yesterday I posted about my car, and this morning she called demanding $200,000. Margaret's pen moved across her legal pad, her expression professionally neutral but attentive, her eyes narrowing slightly as she absorbed the details. Tell me about the estrangement, she said, her tone calm but probing, like a surgeon assessing a wound. I recounted it, the words spilling out with a clarity honed by years of reliving the memory. The sale of my construction company, 43 years of sweat and grit, distilled into a sum exceeding $2 million. The $300,000 gift to Cora and Stuart meant to secure their future, to show my love in a way I thought they'd understand. Stuart's contempt, his voice dripping with venom as he stood in my living room, arms crossed, accusing me of cheating them. "2 million, Harley. And you toss us scraps." Cora's silence. Her eyes fixed on the floor, not defending me, not acknowledging the gift, but siding with her husband's greed. "Maybe if you'd been fair we wouldn't have to do this." She'd said, her words a blade that cut deeper than Stuart's shouts. I explained the aftermath. 5 years of reaching out, of cards returned, unopened texts, ignored holiday messages met with silence. I tried, I said, tapping the timeline. Every attempt is documented here, every rejection. I slid the papers toward her, my hands steady now, the tremor from the morning gone. I kept the door open, hoping she'd come back. But this call, it wasn't about family. It was about money. Margaret studied the documents, her pen pausing as she read the Facebook screenshot, the timestamps, the cold precision of Cora's calculation. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and I saw something there, recognition perhaps of a pattern she'd seen before in her estate planning practice. "What do you want to do, Harley?" The question hung in the air, heavy with possibility. I leaned forward, my voice low but firm. "I want a new will. I want to disinherit Cora completely. Everything, approximately $1.8 million in assets, goes to the Construction Industry Veterans Support Fund." Margaret set down her pen, her gaze steady, searching. "Are you certain disinheriting your only child is legally valid, but it's permanent? Once you present this to her, there's no walking it back." I nodded, the decision solidifying like concrete setting in a mold. "I've had 5 years to think about what family means." She made her choice when she cut me out, when she called only to demand money. Now I'm making mine. She nodded slowly, pulling a thick Pennsylvania state law reference from her bookshelf. She opened it to a marked section, turning it toward me. "Pennsylvania law gives you testamentary freedom," she explained, her finger tracing the page. "You can disinherit adult children, but challenges are possible. We'll include a detailed recital of your reasons, the estrangement, her conduct, the timeline. The more specific we are, the stronger the will becomes." She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And you're certain about the beneficiary? The Veterans Fund?" I didn't hesitate. Those people built their lives with their hands just like I did. They deserve support more than someone who sees me as a dollar sign. Margaret made notes, her pen moving with precision. "We'll include a no-contest clause. Anyone who challenges the will forfeits any potential inheritance. Not that there'd be any for her, but it adds protection." She leaned back, studying me. "If she contests this, she'll likely claim undue influence or diminished capacity. We need to document that you're acting voluntarily, that you understand the implications, and that your reasoning is sound. Then document it." I said, my voice firm. "I want this ironclad. I'm not punishing her. I'm protecting what I built from someone who only values it as money she's owed." For the next hour, we worked through the details, specific language, asset inventory, witness requirements, notarization procedures. Margaret asked probing questions about my mental state, my understanding of consequences, my voluntary decision-making. Standard procedure, she explained, to demonstrate competency if the will was ever challenged. I answered clearly, providing financial documents explaining my reasoning without emotion or anger. This was business strategic, the way I'd approached every major decision in my construction career. But as we spoke, that prickle of unease returned sharper now, like a shadow moving just out of sight. I glanced at the window, the city skyline shimmering in the heat, but there was nothing, no silhouette, no movement. Yet the feeling persisted, as if something was watching, waiting its presence, tied to the decision I was making. I pushed it aside, focusing on Margaret's voice, but the sensation lingered, a thread of mystery I couldn't unravel. "One more thing," I said as we wrapped up. "I want 5 notarized copies prepared." Margaret's pen paused mid-note, her eyebrows lifting slightly. 5 copies? That's unconventional. Most people keep wills private until after death. I allowed myself a slight cold smile. I'm not most people. I want her to understand exactly what her phone call cost her. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I'll arrange it. I'll draft the will tonight and have it ready by 9 tomorrow morning. Given the urgency, I'll need a substantial retainer." I wrote the check without blinking, the act as deliberate as every signature I'd placed on a contract over the years. This wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, a foundation laid with precision. Margaret stood, extending her hand. I shook it, feeling the firmness of her grip, the professional confidence that told me she'd create exactly what I needed. As I reached the door, she spoke again. "Harley, this path is legal, you're right, but it's final. Make sure you can live with it." I turned back, meeting her gaze. I've lived with her choice for 5 years. Now she can live with mine. The hallway felt longer as I walked away, the elevator's hum a low counterpoint to the thoughts swirling in my mind. The weight of what I'd set in motion was substantial, but my resolve didn't waver. Tomorrow morning, Margaret would have the documents. Tomorrow evening, Cora would face the consequences of her call. But that prickle, that sense of something unseen, followed me into the parking garage, where the air smelled of concrete and exhaust. I sat in my Mercedes, the leather cool against my skin, and stared at the folder on the passenger seat. The car gleamed under the garage lights, its silver curves a silent testament to my discipline and the spark that had ignited Cora's greed. I started the engine, the low purr steadying me, but as I pulled out, I caught a glimpse of something in the rearview mirror, a shadow, brief and formless, darting behind a concrete pillar. My heart quickened, but when I turned, there was nothing. Just the empty garage, the hum of my car, and the weight of my decision. The drive home was a blur, Philadelphia's streets unfolding in a haze of lengthening shadows. The city lights began to glow sharp against the darkening sky, but my mind was elsewhere, turning over Cora's call, the timestamps, the precise demand for $200,000. There was a pattern here, a puzzle I hadn't solved. Was it just greed, or was there something more? Stewart's influence, perhaps, or a deeper motive hidden behind Cora's cold voice? At home, I locked the door behind me. The house quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock. I placed the folder on my desk, the documents a tangible step toward reclaiming control. But control felt fragile, like a structure built on uncertain ground. I moved to the living room, the photo album still on the bookshelf, its presence a quiet challenge. I didn't open it. Instead, I poured another coffee, the ritual grounding me, and sat in my armchair staring at the backyard through the window. The tomatoes were silhouettes now, their red fading to gray in the dusk. That shadow flickered again just beyond the fence, a fleeting shape too quick to define. I stood, heart pounding, and stepped to the window, my breath fogging the glass. Nothing. Just the empty yard, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. But the prickle was a pulse now, a warning that something was coming. Something tied to Cora's call, to the decision I'd made. I returned to my desk, opening my laptop to review the documents I'd given Margaret. Financial statements. The original will, the gift records, everything was in order. A foundation as solid as any I'd built. But as I scrolled through the files, a new email notification appeared. The sender's name blank. The subject line simply, "Watch your step, Harley." My blood ran cold. I clicked, but the message was empty, just a blank page, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I checked the sender's details. Nothing, an anonymous address, untraceable. I leaned back, my mind racing. Was this Cora Stewart? Someone else entirely? The shadow? The prickle? The email they wove together, a tapestry of mystery I couldn't yet read. But I wasn't afraid. I'd faced storms before: contract disputes, economic downturns, betrayals. This was just another challenge, and I'd meet it with the same resolve that had built my company from nothing. I closed the laptop, the room dark now except for the glow of a single lamp. Tomorrow I'd have the will, the copies, the legal armor to face Cora's dinner. But tonight I sat in the quiet, the prickle a constant companion, a reminder that this game was bigger than I'd thought. I wasn't just protecting my legacy, I was stepping into a battle I didn't fully understand. And I'd be ready. The sun dipped low, painting Philadelphia's suburbs in amber light. As I drove toward Cora's house, the Mercedes humming beneath me, its silver curves, a silent witness to the storm I was about to unleash. My leather portfolio rested on the passenger seat, heavy with 6 notarized copies of my new will documents that would redraw the boundaries of my legacy and sever the last thread of hope I'd clung to for 5 years. My name is Harley Fields, and at 67, I'd built a life on discipline and resilience. Tonight I'd need both to face my daughter, who'd traded our bond for a calculated demand of $200,000. The drive was 40 minutes, the city giving way to manicured lawns and quiet streets, each house whispering success without shouting it. Cora's address hadn't changed, she'd said, but I'd never seen this house purchased with the $300,000 I'd given her and Stewart after selling my construction company. I'd looked it up online, a 2-story colonial with pristine landscaping, the kind of home that screamed ambition. My folder held the evidence of my resolve, the will disinheriting Cora, leaving my $1.8 million estate to the Construction Industry Veterans Support Fund. Margaret Chen had made it bulletproof, and I'd come prepared to deliver it like a verdict. As I navigated the familiar yet foreign roads, that prickle of unease from yesterday returned sharper now, like a shadow moving just beyond my vision. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that fleeting silhouette I'd glimpsed in my backyard and the parking garage. Nothing. Just the empty road, the glow of streetlights flickering to life. But the feeling persisted, a whisper of something unseen, something tied to Cora's call to the anonymous email that had arrived last night. "Watch your step, Harley." I tightened my grip on the wheel, pushing the thought aside. Tonight wasn't about shadows, it was about clarity. I arrived early, parking across from Cora's house, the portfolio a steady weight in my hand. Through the front window I saw movement, curtains shifting, a figure passing briefly. They were watching for me. I sat for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled, and checked the portfolio one last time. 6 copies each, notarized, each bearing my signature and the raised seal of authenticity. This wasn't revenge. It was a lesson, a foundation built to withstand manipulation. I stepped out, my dark jeans and blue button-down shirt chosen for dignity, not flash. I wasn't here to impress. I was here to reclaim what was mine, my autonomy, my legacy. The front door opened before I could knock, Cora's face appearing like a ghost from a past I barely recognized. "Dad," she said, her voice too bright, her smile stretched wide, a performance of warmth that didn't reach her eyes. She hugged me briefly, a mechanical gesture, her arms stiff. "I'm so glad you came." Stewart loomed behind her, his handshake practiced, his smile a salesman's mask. "Harley, good to see you. Come in, come in." The contrast was jarring, 5 years of silence. And now they greeted me like we'd shared coffee last week. I stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of rosemary and roasted meat, the dining room staged like a theater set. Candles flickered on a table set with wine glasses and cloth napkins, the food clearly from an expensive restaurant, still in takeout containers being transferred to porcelain dishes. "We thought we'd make this special," Cora said, gesturing to a chair. "Family should celebrate being together again." Her hands trembled as she poured wine, not from emotion but from nerves, her eyes darting to Stewart for reassurance. I sat, placing the portfolio beside my chair, its presence a silent challenge. Stuart's gaze flicked to it, then away, his smile tightening. The meal began. The conversation stilted a carefully rehearsed script. Cora asked about my health, my house, my investments. Questions designed to probe my resources without seeming mercenary. "How's the new car treating you, Dad?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes sharp. "It looked beautiful in that photo." I nodded, keeping my responses brief, my expression neutral. "It's comfortable, a reward for careful planning." Stuart chimed in, his voice smooth, establishing his expertise. "The market's been volatile, but there are opportunities if you know where to look. Real estate's heating up again." He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes locked on mine. I ate little, watching their glances, their silent communication a choreography of intent. They thought I didn't see it, the way Cora's smile faltered when she thought I wasn't looking, the way Stuart's fingers tapped the table, impatient for the moment they'd planned. After the main course, Stuart leaned back, his casualness calculated. "Harley, I wanted to run something by you." His voice shifted, slipping into salesman mode. "There's an incredible investment opportunity that's come across my desk. Residential development in a growing market, returns projected at 18 to 22% annually. Solid fundamentals." Cora jumped in right on cue, her voice laced with practiced emotion. "Dad, Stuart's been working so hard on this. We finally have a chance to build something real. You understand what it means to build a future. You did it with your company." I let them talk, their words a rehearsed pitch wrapped in flimsy sentiment. Stuart outlined vague details, land acquisition, zoning approvals, profit margins, jargon meant to sound legitimate while revealing nothing concrete. Cora nodded along, playing the supportive wife, the dutiful daughter desperate for her father's help. They paused, waiting for my response, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. I leaned back, arms crossed, my voice quiet but deliberate. "I do understand building a future. I spent 43 years doing it brick by brick." I met Stuart's gaze, then Cora's, holding each for a moment. "I also understand what happens when people see you only as a means to an end." The air shifted, the candles flickering as if sensing the change. I reached down, my movements slow and deliberate, and opened the portfolio. I withdrew 2 copies of the will, their pages crisp, the notary seals raised like scars. I slid them across the table, one to Cora, one to Stuart, the documents landing between the wine glasses and candles with a weight that silenced the room. Stuart picked his up first, his eyes scanning the page, his face transitioning from confusion to comprehension to fury. He stood, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "What is this?" His voice rose sharp and unsteady. "A will. You brought your will to dinner." Cora read slower, her fingers trembling as she turned the page, her performance crumbling. Tears welled in her eyes, but I knew those tears angry, not heartbroken, the kind born of being denied. "You asked for $200,000 after 5 years of not speaking to me," I said, my voice calm, factual, cutting through their shock. "I thought you should know where you stand. You're not in this document, neither of you. Everything goes to the Construction Industry Veterans Support Fund." Cora's voice shook, her tears a mask for rage. "How can you do this? I'm your daughter, your only child." She slammed the document down, the candles flickering violently. "You're throwing away our family for strangers. You were my daughter," I said, my tone steady, unyielding. "Then you chose to become a stranger who only calls when she wants money. This is what that choice costs." Stuart's face reddened, his control slipping. "You can't do this. We'll fight it. You're not in your right mind. We'll prove it." He stepped closer, his voice a low growl, but I didn't flinch. "I'm perfectly sound," I said, standing to meet his gaze. "Ask the notary, the attorney, the witnesses. This document is legal, filed, and final. You wanted to know my value in dollars. Now you know, to you I was worth a phone call. To me, my legacy is worth more." I moved toward the door, the portfolio under my arm, but Cora's voice stopped me, desperate and shrill. "You'll regret this, Dad. Don't walk out that door." I paused at the threshold, not turning back, the weight of 5 years heavy in my chest, but my resolve heavier. "I've spent 5 years with regrets," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Tonight I have clarity instead." I stepped into the cool evening air, the door closing behind me. Shouting erupted inside Cora and Stuart, their voices overlapping, accusing each other of failure, of missteps. I got into my Mercedes, the engine's purr a steady counterpoint to the chaos I'd left behind. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The front door stood open. Stuart silhouetted in the light, his phone pressed to his ear. His eyes locked on my car. I drove into the darkening evening, the prickle of unease returning sharper now, as if the shadow I'd glimpsed before had followed me here. The road stretched ahead, the suburbs fading into the city's glow. But my mind was elsewhere, turning over the confrontation, the look in Cora's eyes, the fury in Stuart's voice. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something larger, something I couldn't yet see. That anonymous email. "Watch your step." Harley flickered in my thoughts. Its blank menace, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Was it from Stuart, a warning of their plan? Or someone else, someone watching from the shadows? I tightened my grip on the wheel, the portfolio beside me a testament to my decision. I'd built my life on solid ground, and tonight I'd laid a new foundation, one that protected my legacy, my dignity, my right to choose. But as I drove, that shadow flickered again just beyond the edge of the road, a fleeting shape in the darkness. I blinked, and it was gone, but the prickle pulsed, a reminder that this game was far from over. The morning after the dinner confrontation, my Philadelphia row house felt like a fortress under siege. The silence that had once been my sanctuary now pulsed with an uneasy charge, as if the walls themselves were bracing for what was to come. My name is Harley Fields, and at 67 I'd built a life on resilience, but nothing had prepared me for the storm unleashed by my daughter Cora's betrayal. Last night I'd walked away from her and Stuart, leaving behind 2 notarized copies of my new will, a document that disinherited them, and redirected my $1.8 million estate to the Construction Industry Veterans Support Fund. I'd expected a reaction, but not this quickly, not this fiercely. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, shattering the pre-dawn quiet. The screen lit up with notifications, 6 missed calls from Cora, 3 from Stuart, and a string of texts from numbers I didn't recognize. I sat up, the gray light filtering through the blinds, casting long shadows across my bedroom. That prickle of unease, the one that had haunted me since Cora's call, returned sharper now, like a blade pressed against my skin. I picked up the phone, scrolling through the messages, each one a dart aimed at my resolve. Cora's texts swung between tearful pleas and venomous accusations. "Dad, please call me. I'm sorry we argued. Can we talk calmly? You're my only family." 6 hours later. "You're being selfish. After everything I've been through, you do this to me. Call me back now." Stuart's messages were colder, strategic. An email with the subject line, "Legal action," arrived at 3:17 a.m. "Mr. Fields, your actions demonstrate malicious intent or diminished mental capacity. We will consult an attorney to challenge your will on grounds of undue influence and incompetence. This can be resolved, or it can become expensive for your estate. Your choice." I set the phone down, my hands steady, despite the storm in my chest. They were panicking, and panicked people made mistakes. I'd learned that in 43 years of running a construction company. Document everything, anticipate the cracks, and build your defenses before the structure fails. I opened my laptop, creating a folder labeled Evidence. I took screenshots of every text, saved every voicemail, and began a spreadsheet: date, time, sender, message. Type content summary. Threats, manipulation, guilt trips, legal intimidation, each categorized with the precision of a blueprint. The voicemails were worse than the texts. Cora's voice thick with staged tears. "How can you do this to your own daughter? I made mistakes, but 5 years, you're punishing me forever. That money is my inheritance, my family's legacy." Stewart's was a cold recitation of legal options. His tone clipped professional, as if he were negotiating a contract rather than dismantling our family. I saved each recording, the files stacking up like bricks in a wall I was building to protect myself. By mid-morning, the barrage continued, my phone buzzing relentlessly. I ignored it, focusing on the ritual of coffee shower shave normalcy, to anchor me before engaging with their attack. But as I stood at the kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, a car pulled into my driveway, its tires crunching aggressively against the gravel. Cora. She stepped out, slamming the door, her face a mask of fury and desperation. "Harley!" she shouted, standing on my front lawn, her voice carrying through the quiet neighborhood. "I know you're in there. You can't hide from this." I moved to the front window, staying out of sight, my phone already recording. Pennsylvania law allowed recording on my property for security purposes, and I wasn't taking chances. Cora paced her hands, gesturing wildly, alternating between sobs and accusations. "You're cruel, vindictive. Everyone needs to know what kind of father does this." Curtains twitched in nearby windows, neighbors peering out, drawn by the spectacle. I kept recording, my breath steady, my focus sharp. Then Danny Morrison emerged from his house 2 doors down, his weathered face set in the calm authority of a retired cop. Early 70s, steady as bedrock, he walked toward Cora with the measured confidence of someone who'd spent decades handling chaos. "Miss," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I'm going to ask you to leave. This is disturbing the peace, and Mr. Fields is within his rights to not engage." Cora turned on him, her eyes blazing. "You don't understand what he's doing. I understand you're on someone else's property shouting." Danny cut in, his tone unchanged. He tapped his phone meaningfully. "That's enough. Time to go." She hesitated, then shouted toward my window, "This isn't over. You'll regret this." She got back in her car, tires squealing as she sped away. Danny waited until she was gone, then walked to my door. I opened it before he knocked. "You all right, Harley?" His eyes showed concern, but his voice was steady. "That was quite a show." "I'm fine," I said, gesturing to my phone. "I've documented everything. If they escalate, I might need you as a witness if you're willing." 30 years on the force," he said, nodding. "I know how family disputes get ugly. You've got my number. That video you took, keep it safe. Might need it." I thanked him, sending a brief text to establish a written record of the incident. Back inside, I saved the video to my evidence folder, noting Danny's availability as a witness. The prickle of unease returned stronger now, as if Cora's outburst had stirred something deeper, something I couldn't see. I glanced out the window, half expecting that fleeting shadow from before, but the yard was empty, the tomatoes glowing faintly in the morning light. That evening, I composed an email to Margaret Chen, subject line, "Anticipated legal challenge." I attached everything: message screenshots, voicemail transcripts, the video of Cora's scene, my timeline spreadsheet. Staying one step ahead, I wrote, then closed my laptop as the sun set, painting my living room in amber. The silence that followed felt ominous, a calm before a storm I knew was coming. 2 days of quiet passed, a deceptive lull that only heightened my vigilance. I reviewed investment statements, trying to maintain routine, but my mind was elsewhere, turning over Cora's motives, Stewart's threats, that anonymous email. "Watch your step, Harley." Then my phone rang. Margaret's name on the screen. I answered immediately. "Harley, I received formal notice this morning," she said, her voice serious but measured. "Stewart retained Nathan Berkowitz, aggressive but predictable. They're filing to contest the will on grounds of diminished capacity and emotional duress. We need to move fast." Relief washed over me, not anxiety. The ambiguity was gone. The fight was now formal, with rules I could navigate. I expected this, I said. What do we need? Medical evaluation, psychological assessment. Anything proving you're of sound mind. The stronger the documentation, the faster we shut this down. Can you see your doctor today? I'll make it happen, I said. What else? I'll prepare our defensive package, but they'll argue the timing proves this was rash, emotionally driven. We need to show deliberation, careful thought, professional consultation. I called Dr. Stevens' office the moment we hung up, explaining the situation briefly. His nurse found an opening that afternoon. The examination was thorough: cognitive function tests, memory, reasoning, processing, speed blood work to rule out medical issues affecting judgment. Dr. Stevens, my physician for 15 years, was methodical, his hands steady as he reviewed the results. Harley, your cognitive function is excellent, he said. Memory, reasoning, judgment, all better than average for your age. Blood pressure's good, no neurological issues. You're healthier than most 67-year-olds I see. I need that in writing, I said. Detailed. Someone's claiming I'm not competent. A month. He nodded, understanding immediately. Family dispute over money, huh? I'll have a comprehensive report ready by tomorrow. You're one of the most clear-headed patients I have. The next day, I visited Dr. Patricia Hang, a psychologist Margaret recommended for elder competency assessments. Her office was quiet, professional, the walls lined with framed degrees. For 2 hours, she tested me: mental status exams, decision-making scenarios, emotional state evaluations. Walk me through your decision to change your will, she said, pen poised over her notepad. What was your thought process? I laid it out, organized, precise. My daughter didn't contact me for 5 years. Then she called demanding $200,000 the day after seeing my car on Facebook. That showed me she values me only as a source of money. I consulted my attorney, considered my options for 24 hours, and decided my assets would do more good supporting veterans than enabling someone who sees relationships as transactions. That's a coherent, logical progression, she said, making notes. Do you feel pressured by anyone? The opposite, I said. I was pressured to give money. I chose not to, she probed further. Coercion. Depression, impaired judgment. Found nothing. Mr. Fields, you demonstrate full mental capacity and sound decision-making, she concluded. I'll provide a detailed report. Back at Margaret's office, she reviewed both reports, satisfaction flickering in her eyes. This is solid. 2 independent professionals confirming your competence, combined with the timeline and consultation with me. Their case is weak, but expect them to fight dirty. They already are, I said, explaining the latest development. Tom Chen, a former business associate, had called yesterday after running into Stewart at a restaurant. Stewart had painted me as confused, emotionally unstable, struggling with memory. He's spreading rumors, I told Margaret, trying to control the narrative. Document everything, she said firmly. If it crosses into defamation, we'll use it. That evening I made calls not to defend myself emotionally, but to share facts. When Tom expressed concern, I was direct. I've completed full medical and psychological evaluations, Tom. I'm happy to send copies. Stewart's contesting my will because he doesn't like it. The doctor visits protect my right to choose. Silence. Then I appreciate your honesty, Harley. Stewart made it sound different. I imagine he did, I said, documenting the call, saving every voicemail, building my evidence file. But the prickle returned stronger now as I sat in my living room, the photo album untouched on the bookshelf. I glanced out the window, the backyard dark except for the faint glow of a streetlight. There it was, again, a shadow fleeting near the fence. I stood, heart pounding, and moved to the glass, my breath fogging the pain. Nothing. Just the rustle of leaves, the hum of the city. But the shadow felt closer, its presence tied to the email, to Cora's outburst, to the fight I was waging. I opened my laptop, pulling up Margaret's email. We need to make their target smaller, I typed. What if I transfer assets now before they can contest the will and irrevocable trust? Maybe I hit send, my mind racing. If they wanted to fight over my estate, I'd ensure there was less to fight for. The Construction Industry Veterans Support Fund deserved it more than Cora's greed. Margaret's response came quickly. An irrevocable trust removes assets from your estate immediately. They're gone untouchable. Come in tomorrow. We'll make it happen. I spent the next day reviewing my finances, account statements, investment portfolios, property valuations. I settled on $500,000, significant enough to matter, but not so much I'd compromise my retirement. At Margaret's office, she had coffee, waiting, her laptop open to trust documents. "This is aggressive," she said, her voice steady but intrigued. "Once you sign, those assets are gone. You can't change your mind." "I won't," I said, my resolve a steel beam. "They want to fight over my money. Let's give them less to fight for." The signing was meticulous, same witnesses as the will, same careful notarization. Margaret walked me through each section: grantor provisions, beneficiary designations, irrevocability clauses. I paused before each signature, rereading, ensuring my intent was clear. When it was done, I called my investment broker, Mark. "I need to transfer $500,000 in securities to a new trust account. Margaret will provide details." "That's a big move, Mr. Fields," Mark said, surprised. "This is for a charitable trust, the Construction Industry Veterans Support Fund," I confirmed. "People who built things deserve support." "I'll process it today," he said. "Confirmation by close of business." I pocketed my phone, feeling the weight of what I'd done. $500,000 was now beyond Cora and Stewart's reach, a legacy redirected to those who valued effort over entitlement. But as I left Margaret's office, that shadow flickered again, just beyond the parking garage's concrete pillars. I froze, my pulse quickening, but it was gone, leaving only the echo of my own footsteps. The prickle pulsed a warning that this fight wasn't over, that something or someone was still watching, waiting for my next move. The Philadelphia morning was crisp, the October air carrying a bite that sharpened my senses as I sat at my desk, the leather portfolio now a familiar weight beside me. My name is Harley Fields, and at 67 I'd spent a lifetime building structures that stood firm against storms. But the storm I faced now, unleashed by my daughter Cora and her husband Stewart, was one of betrayal, greed, and a shadow I couldn't quite name. For weeks they'd waged war against my decision to disinherit them, their harassment escalating from texts to public outbursts to legal threats. I'd countered with precision, a new will redirecting my $1.8 million estate to the Construction Industry Veterans Support Fund, an irrevocable trust, transferring $500,000 beyond their reach, and medical evaluations proving my mental clarity. Yet that prickle of unease, the one that had haunted me since Cora's first call, pulsed stronger now, as if the shadow I'd glimpsed in my backyard, my garage, and outside her house was closing in. My phone buzzed, snapping me from my thoughts. A text from Cora, the first in days since her driveway tantrum. "Dad, can we meet? Just to talk, no fighting. I want to fix this. Café Lumiere, 2 p.m. today, please." The words were softer than her previous venom, but I wasn't fooled. Her tears at the dinner, her pleas in voicemails, they were performances, each one unraveling when she didn't get her way. This was another move in their game, and I'd be ready. I replied, "I'll be there." 2 p.m., short, neutral, giving nothing away. I opened my evidence folder on my laptop, reviewing the screenshots, voicemails, and the video of Cora shouting on my lawn. Every piece was catalogued, a fortress of facts to counter their lies. I added a note about this meeting, including the text, my response, and the time. Then I slipped a small digital recorder into my pocket, legal in Pennsylvania for in-person conversations, as Margaret Chen had confirmed. If Cora and Stewart wanted to play, I'd have their words on tape. Before leaving, I called Margaret. "They've asked for a meeting," I said, my voice steady. "Café Lumiere, 2 o'clock. I'm recording it." "Good," she said, her tone sharp with approval. "Their attorney Berkowitz is pushing hard for a settlement. He's claiming emotional duress and mental instability, but your evaluations and trust shut that down. If they slip up today, it could end this." "Be careful, Harley. They're desperate. Desperate. The word hung in the air as I hung up. I glanced out the kitchen window, the backyard quiet, the tomatoes now fading in the cooler season. No shadow today, but the prickle remained a pulse that felt almost alive, as if it were tied to the anonymous email I'd received weeks ago. "Watch your step, Harley." I'd traced it to no avail, untraceable, a dead end. But it wasn't Cora or Stuart. Their approach was too direct, too clumsy. Someone else was watching, and this meeting might draw them out. Café Lumière was a 15-minute drive, a small upscale place in Center City, with exposed brick walls and soft jazz humming through hidden speakers. I arrived early, choosing a corner table by the window where I could see the street and the door. The portfolio sat beside me. Its contents 4 remaining copies of the will, the trust agreement, medical reports, my shield and sword. I ordered a black coffee, its bitterness grounding me, and checked the recorder in my pocket. On ready, its tiny red light, a silent ally. Cora and Stuart arrived at 2:05, their entrance staged like actors hitting their mark. Cora wore a tailored blazer, her hair pulled back, her face softened with practiced remorse. Stuart, in a crisp suit, carried the same salesman's smile from the dinner, but it was tighter now, strained. They sat across from me, Cora's hands folded neatly, Stuart's tapping the table, betraying his nerves. "Dad," Cora began, her voice trembling just enough to seem genuine. "I'm so sorry for how things went at dinner. I was upset, hurt. I didn't mean to push you away again." I nodded, sipping my coffee, my expression neutral. "You asked for this meeting. What do you want to say?" Stuart leaned forward, his tone conciliatory but calculated. "Harley, we got off on the wrong foot. The will, the trust, it feels like a misunderstanding. We're family. We want to work this out, not fight in court." I let them talk, the recorder capturing every word. Cora spoke of family, of memories, her voice cracking artfully as she mentioned our old trips to the Jersey Shore, my teaching her to ride a bike. "I miss that, Dad," she said, her eyes glistening. "I know I've been distant, but life got complicated. Stuart's business took a hit, and we're struggling. That's why I asked for help." $200,000, I said, my voice flat, cutting through her performance. "That's what you asked for the day after seeing my car on Facebook. Not a conversation, not a reconnection, a demand." Her face faltered, the tears vanishing as quickly as they'd appeared. Stuart jumped in, his voice smooth but edged with urgency. "It wasn't a demand, Harley. It was a request, poorly worded. We're in a tough spot, creditors, a failed deal. We thought you'd want to help your daughter." I leaned back, my eyes moving between them, reading their tells, the way Cora's fingers tightened on her coffee cup, the way Stuart's smile twitched. "You thought I'd hand over $200,000 because I bought a car," I said. "You thought 5 years of silence could be erased with a dinner and a sob story. Tell me what you really want." The air shifted, the jazz fading into the background as the cafe's hum seemed to quiet. Cora's mask slipped, her eyes narrowing. "Fine," she said, her voice low, sharp. "You want honesty? We need that money to save Stuart's business. You have millions, Dad. You're sitting on it, hoarding it while we're drowning. Is that fair? Fair?" I repeated, my tone cold but controlled. "Was it fair when you ignored my calls, my cards for 5 years, when you took $300,000 for a house and called it scraps? When you only called because you saw a car on Facebook?" Stuart's hand slammed the table, rattling the cups, drawing glances from nearby patrons. "You're twisting this," he snapped. "We're trying to build something, and you're punishing us for wanting a piece of what you owe us, owe you." I said, my voice steady, cutting through his anger. "I owe you nothing. I gave you a home, a start. You chose to see me as a bank, not a father." Cora's voice rose desperate, her composure unraveling. "You're choosing strangers over your own blood. That Veterans Fund, what do they mean to you?" "I'm your daughter." She leaned forward, her eyes blazing, but I saw no love there, only entitlement. I reached into the portfolio, pulling out a copy of the will and the trust agreement, sliding them across the table. "This is what you're fighting for," I said. "Read it again. 500,000 is already in an irrevocable trust for the Veterans Fund. It's gone. The rest is allocated the same way when I'm gone. You can fight, but you'll lose." Stewart snatched the documents, his eyes scanning them, his face reddening. "You think this is over? We'll drag this through court for years. We'll prove you're not competent, that you were coerced." I smiled, a cold, deliberate curve of my lips. "You're on tape, Stewart. Every word since you sat down. Pennsylvania's a one-party consent state. You just admitted to needing money for your business, to seeing my car as a trigger, to planning to challenge my mental state. Good luck with that." Their faces froze. Cora's mouth opening then closing. Stewart's eyes darting to my pocket as if he could see the recorder. The cafe's hum returned, but it felt distant, the world narrowing to this table, this moment. I stood gathering my portfolio, my coffee untouched. "You have one chance to walk away," I said. "Drop the challenge, or this recording goes to Margaret Chen, and your case collapses." Cora's voice was a whisper, trembling with rage. "You're heartless." "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "I'm clear. You chose money over family. I'm choosing my legacy over your greed." I walked out the cafe door, chiming behind me, the autumn air cool against my skin. In the rearview mirror, I saw them still at the table, heads bent, arguing in hushed tones. My heart ached, not for the daughter I'd faced, but for the one I'd lost years ago. The recorder burned in my pocket, a weapon I hadn't wanted to use but would. That evening, I met Margaret at her office, the city lights glittering beyond her window. I played the recording, her pen moving furiously as she took notes. "This is gold," she said, her voice sharp with satisfaction. "They've admitted their financial motives, their intent to challenge your competency without evidence. Berkowitz will fold when he hears this." "Send it to him," I said. "End this." She did, attaching the audio file to a formal letter demanding they withdraw their contest or face a countersuit for defamation and frivolous litigation. By the next morning, Berkowitz called Margaret, his tone clipped professional. "My clients are prepared to withdraw the challenge," he said, "provided no further action is taken." Margaret relayed the message, her eyes gleaming. "They're done, Harley. They know the recording destroys their case. You've won." I nodded, the weight of victory settling over me, but it wasn't joy I felt, it was clarity, a finality that closed a chapter I'd held open too long. "Thank you, Margaret," I said, "for everything." Back home, I sat in my armchair, the house quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock. The portfolio rested on my desk, its contents no longer a shield, but a monument to my resolve. I'd protected my legacy, my dignity, my right to choose. But that prickle remained, a pulse that hadn't faded with the legal victory. I glanced at the backyard, the darkness absolute, now no shadow, no movement. Yet the feeling lingered, tied to that email, to the fleeting silhouettes, to a puzzle I hadn't solved. I opened my laptop, reviewing the evidence folder one last time. The anonymous email stared back, its blank menace a question mark. Who had sent it? Not Cora, not Stewart. Their moves were too overt, too desperate. Someone else had been watching, someone tied to this fight in ways I couldn't see. I closed the laptop, the prickle a quiet companion, a reminder that while one battle was won, the shadow might still be waiting. The Philadelphia dusk settled over my row house, the amber light of late October spilling through the blinds, casting long, quiet shadows across my living room. I sat in my armchair, the leather worn but familiar, a cup of black coffee cooling on the table beside me. My name is Harley Fields, and at 67 I'd built a life on foundations of grit and discipline, 43 years. Turning blueprints into reality. A construction empire sold for millions, a legacy I'd fought to protect. The battle with my daughter Cora and her husband Stewart was over. Their legal challenge to my will had collapsed, undone by their own recorded words at Café Lumière, where they'd revealed their greed, demanding $200,000, admitting their desperation, threatening to prove me incompetent. My new will disinheriting them and directing my $1.8 million estate to the Construction Industry Veterans Support Fund stood firm. The $500,000 irrevocable trust I'd established was untouchable, a testament to my resolve. Yet the prickle of unease that had haunted me for weeks, the fleeting shadow in my backyard, my garage outside, Imade Cora's house, and the anonymous email warning, "Watch your step," Harley lingered, a final puzzle I needed to solve. The house was quiet. The only sound, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall, its rhythm steady grounding. My leather portfolio rested on my desk, its contents, wills, trust agreements, medical reports, the recording now relics of a war won. I'd expected relief, perhaps even triumph, but what I felt was something deeper, clarity, a stillness that came from knowing I'd protected what mattered most. Not the money, not the assets, but my right to choose my legacy, to honor those who'd built alongside me, rather than those who'd seen me as a vault to crack. I stood moving to the bookshelf where the photo album sat, its spine worn from years of quiet handling. I hadn't opened it since Cora's call, afraid of the memories. It held Cora at 5, laughing on my shoulders at 18, beaming in her graduation gown at 29, radiant in her wedding dress. I pulled it down, the weight heavier than its pages, and opened it to the first photo, Cora and me at the park, her tiny hand in mine. The ache was still there, sharp and raw, but it wasn't for the Cora who'd sat across from me at the cafe, her eyes blazing with entitlement. It was for the girl she'd been, the one I'd lost to time and choices I couldn't undo. I closed the album, setting it back on the shelf, a deliberate act of letting go. I didn't need to cling to those memories anymore, they were part of me. But they weren't my future. My future was the Veterans Fund, the men and women who'd poured their lives into building, who deserved support more than a daughter who'd traded love for money. I'd scheduled a meeting with the fund's director next week to discuss my contribution to ensure the $500,000 trust, and the rest, when I was gone, would build something lasting: scholarships, job training, mental health programs for those who'd given their all. The prickle stirred, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at the backyard through the window, the darkness absolute. Now the tomatoes long gone in the autumn chill. No shadow tonight, but its absence felt deliberate, as if it were waiting, watching just beyond my sight. The anonymous email, "Watch your step." Harley hadn't faded with my legal victory. It wasn't Cora or Stewart. Their moves were too clumsy, too overt. Someone else had sent it. Someone tied to this fight in ways I hadn't uncovered. I opened my laptop, the evidence folder, a monument to my preparation, and stared at the email again. Blank, untraceable, its menace, a quiet pulse in the digital void. A knock at the door startled me, sharp and unexpected in the evening's quiet. I stood, my pulse quickening, and checked the peephole. Danny Morrison. My neighbor stood on the porch, his weathered face lit by the streetlight, his expression unreadable. I opened the door, the cool air rushing in. "Danny," I said, stepping aside. "Everything okay?" He nodded, his eyes scanning my living room before settling on me. "Heard you had a rough few weeks," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "Thought I'd check in. That scene with your daughter in the driveway, folks are still talking." I gestured to the armchair, offering him a seat. "It's over now," I said, my voice steady. "They dropped their legal challenge. The will stands, the trust is secure." He sat, his hands resting on his knees, a retired cop's posture, alert, assessing. "Good to hear. But I saw something odd the other night, figured you should know. A car parked down the street late. No plates I could make out. Someone watching your house. Didn't like the look of it." The prickle surged, a cold current down my spine. When I asked, my voice calm but my mind racing. 2 nights ago around midnight. I was up, couldn't sleep. Saw it from my window. Dark sedan, tinted windows. It idled for maybe 10 minutes, then left. Couldn't get a clear look at the driver. I nodded, filing the information away. "Thanks, Danny. Keep an eye out, will you? Always do, he said, standing. You've got my number if you need me. After he left, I locked the door. The prickle now a pulse I couldn't ignore. A car watching my house, the shadow. The email they were connected, a pattern I was close to unraveling. I sat at my desk, opening my laptop again, and searched the email's metadata one last time, digging deeper than before. Hidden in the headers, buried in code I'd overlooked, was a fragment, an IP address tied to a local server, one used by a small private investigation firm in Philadelphia. The realization hit like a hammer. Someone had been hired to watch me, to warn me, to unsettle me. I called Margaret Chen, my voice steady despite the revelation. I found something, I said, explaining the email's origin. A PI firm. Someone's been tracking me, sending warnings. It's not Cora or Stuart. Margaret's response was immediate, her tone sharp. Give me the details. I'll run it down. If someone's involved, we'll find them. This could be harassment, intimidation, grounds for a restraining order, or worse. I sent her the information, my mind turning over possibilities. A creditor Stuart owed. A rival of his trying to leverage Cora's greed, or something else entirely. Tied to the shadow that felt almost alive. A presence beyond explanation. I leaned back of the house, silent again. The clock ticking steadily. The prickle was still there, but it felt different now, less a warning, more a guide, urging me to see this through. The next day, Margaret called with answers. The PI firm's a small outfit hired anonymously through a shell account, she said. But the payment traced back to a business associate of Stuart's, a developer named Victor Klein, tied to the failed deal Stuart mentioned at the cafe. Looks like Klein was pressuring Stuart to secure your money, maybe thought a scare would push you to settle. I exhaled, the pieces clicking into place. The email, the car, it was Klein. Likely, she said. We've notified his attorney. He's backing off, claiming it was a misunderstanding. No more emails, no more cars. You're clear, Harley. Clear. The words settled over me, a weight lifted but not gone. The shadow. The prickle, they'd been real, tied to Klein's attempt to manipulate me, but their presence had felt larger, almost otherworldly, as if they'd carried a message beyond his intent. I thanked Margaret, hanging up, and sat in the quiet, the dusk deepening outside. I walked to the window, the backyard dark, the fence a silhouette against the streetlight's glow. No shadow tonight, no prickle, just the stillness of a battle won. I'd protected my legacy, not just from Cora and Stuart, but from the unseen forces that had tried to unsettle me. The Veterans Fund was my future now, a foundation to build something lasting, something true. I returned to my armchair, the photo album untouched on the shelf. I didn't need to open it anymore. The past was part of me, but it no longer defined me. I sipped my coffee, cold but grounding, and looked out at the city lights, steady and unyielding. I'd learned what family meant, not blood, but respect, shared values, the courage to build and protect what matters. Cora had chosen her path, I'd chosen mine. And in that choice I'd found peace, not the absence of pain, but the strength to carry it. The clock ticked on the house, quiet, the shadows still. I was ready for what came next, whatever it might be.